Mötley Crüe was formed in 1981 by bassist Nikki Sixx and drummer Tommy Lee. They later recruited Mick Mars on guitar and Vince Neil on vocals. They're undeniably one of the biggest bands in the 1980s. While still fairly hair metal, they had more of an edge than, say, Bon Jovi or Def Leppard. My first concert was actually Mötley Crüe. My mom took me to see them in 2005, and we actually left halfway through. The sound was terrible, and I kinda hated it. But I got into the band later after seeing some music videos and a live DVD. They were actually my second favorite band for a while behind Kiss, but as I got a little older, I started to not like them as much. The band has recorded 9 studio albums in the span of a little less than 30 years. I'm going to be ranking them from my least favorite to my favorite. Now, this is just studio albums, not EPs, not live albums, not greatest hits, just the core catalog of studio albums. And it's just my opinion, you are free to disagree. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe, and you can support the channel on Patreon. Number 9, Theater of Pain. Released in 1985, this was produced by Tom Werman. It is the band's third album and achieved quadruple platinum status. The band was in a pretty bad place at the time. Neil had gotten drunk at a party and left with Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle to go get more beer, and ended up crashing into another vehicle, killing Razzle and severely injuring the passengers in the other car. This caused a bit of a rift, and on top of that, Sixx had become addicted to heroin. By their own admission, it became more about the drugs and all of that, and less about the music. And I think you can tell listening to it, the band has completely thrown the album under the bus, saying that if it wasn't for the singles, Home Sweet Home and Smokin' in the Boys' Room, the album would be worthless. That sentiment is reflected in their biopic, The Dirt. And yeah, I kind of agree. There's some cool guitar stuff from Mars, but other than that, it's pretty lame and boring. It's more of a glam metal thing. It doesn't quite have the punch and the attitude of the first 2 records. It just sort of happens and exists, almost directionless. It feels empty to me. Number 8, Generation Swine. Released in 1997, this was produced by Scott Humphrey. It is the band's 7th album and achieved gold status. In the early 90s, Neil either quit the band or was fired. They never got their story straight there. And they brought on the Scream singer John Corabi to replace him. This new version of the band released an album we'll talk about later, but it didn't sell as well, and the record label very much wanted the band to reunite with Neil, feeling that was the solution. The band resisted that idea, but went on a bit of a firing spree, including their then manager Doug Taylor and producer Bob Rock. They teamed with Humphrey and started working on the album with Corabi. The sessions went pretty badly. The 90s were not a good time to be a hair metal band. Nirvana had come in and pretty much eliminated 90% of them. Generation Swine feels very much like an attempt to be current and hip. The problem was that Sixx, Lee, and Humphrey could not really agree on anything, and the sessions were apparently a nightmare, to the point that Corabi was a little relieved when the band decided to bring Neil back during the recording process. Though Corabi would later sue the band as he felt his work on Generation Swine had not been properly credited. There are 3 big problems with Generation Swine. One is that it's random. It feels like they were just throwing shit at the wall and hoping something would stick. There's no cohesive vision to what this album should be. Every other Mötley record has some kind of an identity, something you can define. I don't know what Generation Swine is, other than a desperate attempt to be relevant. Even just the lyrics kind of show this. There's typically Mötley stuff about how they're the bad boys of rock and so cool and dangerous, that kind of thing they like to do. Then there are a couple songs about suicide, which are so at odds with the other material. And then there are 2 songs about Donna D'Errico and one about Lee's son Brandon, and probably Sixx's worst lyric, "Let's make a baby inside of you." 2 is that Neil struggled on the album. The songs were written with and for Corabi, and it's pretty apparent. Let Us Pray, for example, just sounds like a leftover from the 94 album. This material was tough for Neil to sing, and you can kind of hear it on the album. Additionally, it's a little hard to buy Neil singing some of these darker lyrics. It's just odd. 3 is the production. They were experimenting with techno kind of stuff, and I'm not necessarily against that. I just don't think it sounds very good. The guitars sound like farts. It's weird and random and kind of kills a lot of the material for me. Like, I do think some of these songs are pretty solid for the most part, but I don't really like listening to them because of the weird choices. It's a weird, confused album that doesn't come together for me. Number 7, Saints of Los Angeles. Released in 2008, this was produced by James Michael, Six, and DJ Ashba. It is the band's ninth and, time of recording, final album. One of the big hesitations people have with this one is the involvement of Michael and Ashba. In 2007, Six released a memoir called The Heroin Diaries, a chronicle of the worst year of his life, 1987, when he was addicted to heroin. Six teamed with Michael and Ashba, forming the band 6am, to record a soundtrack concept album released the same year. I've seen Saints of Los Angeles referred to as a 6am album, and there were rumors that some of the guitar work was Ashba, not Mars, though I don't think those rumors were ever confirmed. The album is kind of similar to The Heroin Diaries in that it is a soundtrack concept album. It was initially intended to be a companion piece to the film adaptation of the Crüe's memoir, The Dirt, but that didn't end up happening as the film took about another 10 years to take shape. But it still is a cool concept. It's a Mötley Crüe biography in album form. I like that idea and it works. But personally, I don't think it's very good. It's an okay album. There are standout tracks, the title track in particular, which got them a Grammy nomination, but a lot of it is kind of blah with some real cringe-inducing lyrics. Number 6, Shout at the Devil. Released in 1983, this was produced by Tom Werman. It is the band's second album and achieved quadruple platinum status. This is the album that really broke the band and is probably most fans' favorite album. I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. It's a solid record and there's cool stuff. I really like Mars's guitar tone and his playing is great. There's more of an edge than Too Fast for Love, which is cool, but I wish it sounded bigger. I'm not crazy about the production, and I don't think all of the material holds up as well as some of their other albums. Number 5, Girls, Girls, Girls. Released in 1987, this was produced by Tom Werman. It is the band's fourth album and achieved quadruple platinum status. Prior to this video, I would have ranked this much lower. I sort of viewed it like I view Theater of Pain, a mostly unmemorable album helped by good singles. But listening to it again for this, I really liked it. There was an effort to have a more blues-influenced style that really works. It almost feels like a throwback record to the 50s while still also being very 80s. But that influence is there. There's a reason there's an Elvis Presley cover on this thing. There's a lot of fun riffs, and I really enjoy the addition of the female background vocals. It's a pretty fun album that I think holds up pretty well. Number 4, Too Fast for Love. Released in 1981, this was produced by Mötley Crüe. It is the band's debut album and achieved platinum status. The band recorded it in just a couple days for like a couple $1,000 and released it themselves through their own label, Leather Records. This got them noticed by Elektra Records, who signed the band, and they brought in Roy Thomas Baker to remix the album, and then it was re-released in 1982. Being cheap and fast, it's not a great production, but that's almost kind of the appeal of it. It's got a bit of a punk edge to it, and Mars's guitar tone is great. He is the MVP of the album, as I think he often is. His picking and style of playing, particularly on the riffs, is a huge part of Mötley Crüe's sound and why they're memorable. It's a fun album. Good hooks, fun riffs, it's all memorable and catchy. It's this neat sort of mix of pop rock and punk that works really well. Number 3, New Tattoo. Released in 2000, this was produced by Mike Klink. It is the band's 8th studio album. In 1999, Lee quit the band following a fight with Neil. Ozzy Osbourne drummer Randy Castillo was brought in to replace him, but he fell ill prior to the tour and was replaced by Samantha Maloney. Also in 1999, James Michael had released a solo album called Inhale, which caught Six's attention and the two started writing together. Michael helped write quite a bit of this album, and I think you can hear his influence, which is a good thing. I think he's talented, and there's lots of very good, catchy choruses on this one. It's clearly meant to be a throwback to their classic catalog, a proper follow-up to Dr. Feelgood. The second Hell in High Heels start, you can sort of tell that. It's got that cool guitar tone again. Mars gets to kick ass again. Castillo's drumming is also great. The album mostly gets overlooked because it's not the original four, and I don't think that's fair. Castillo is awesome. I think this is a very underrated album with some really great songs. It's so weird to me that the band, mostly Six, will go out of his way to defend Generation Swine, but then put the 94 album down and pretend like this one doesn't exist. Number 2, Dr. Feelgood. Released in 1989, this was produced by Bob Rock. It is the band's 5th album and went 6 times platinum. In late 1987, Six overdosed on heroin and technically died for a couple minutes before being revived by a paramedic. A European tour was canceled because it was felt by Mötley Crüe's management at the time that if they went to Europe, they would come back in body bags. Instead, it was decided that the band would all get sober together. They teamed with Rock in Vancouver and made their most successful album, the only one to top the Billboard charts, and it earned them 2 Grammy nominations. And yeah, it's damn good. I think the band is much better with Rock producing. It's a great sound, and their focus was just on music. And it shows in the material. It's just top to bottom great stuff. Number 1, Mötley Crüe. Released in 1994, this was produced by Bob Rock. It is the band's 6th album and achieved gold status. As I said earlier, John Corabi had come in to replace Neil, and this was the resulting album. I've reviewed this album on my channel before, so this should really come as no surprise. I think this is easily the Crüe's best album. The production is killer, the guitars sound awesome, and the drums are huge. Corabi brought a lot to the band. One is that he played guitar. Having 2 guitars makes a lot more room to do cool stuff, especially for Mars. And there are cool riffs and solos all over this album. It's killer stuff. Corabi is a great lyricist and worked with Six on that, and I think the songs are a lot more interesting lyrically. Plus, I think Corabi is a better singer than Neil. The entire album is just so heavy and cool, and I love it. So that's my ranking. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like Mötley Crüe? What's your ranking of their albums? Are there any songs outside of their main albums that you like? I personally quite like Bitter Pill and Enslaved from the 98 Greatest Hits album. And of course, Primal Scream is pretty big for them. Be sure to do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, share, and all that. And thank you for watching.